Hey, good to see you again. I'm Mani Khanuja, and if this is where you're joining me, I'm a Principal Generative AI Specialist Solutions Architect at AWS. So today we run a clinic. I'll put three things in front of you that you'd really see on a bad afternoon, and you get a couple of seconds on each one to work out what's going on, and then we'll go through it together. And do you need the episodes before this one? Not really, because I'll give you whatever you need as we go. And one thing I'd like you holding all the way through. Every answer today comes out of the same afternoon's work, one experiment on your own server, and you could run it tonight. So watch for it as we go. Question one. Your throughput is terrible. You're getting a fraction of the tokens per second you expected. So you log in and run nvidia-smi, and that's the little command that prints out what your GPU is doing right now. And it tells you your GPU utilization is 100%. So the card is flat out and you're still slow. What's going on? That number isn't telling you what you think it is. And honestly, it isn't a utilization number at all. So what does it actually measure? NVIDIA's own documentation defines it in one sentence, and it's on screen. Percent of time over the past sample period during which one or more kernels was executing. So let's take that apart, right? It's percent of time. And a kernel is just one job you hand to the GPU, so one or more of them means at least one, any one at all. So that number asks a yes or no question, was anything running, and then tells you how often the answer was yes. Think of a light switch with a stopwatch on it. Your light was on for the whole minute, so 100%. And how many people were in that room getting work done? It has no idea. And it was never counting that. And how far apart can those two get? An H100 has up to 132 little processors inside it, and they're called SMs, streaming multiprocessors, and they're where your math actually happens. So run something that keeps one of those busy and leaves the other 131 idle. What does your reading say? 100%, right? So now take the stage that writes your answer out one word at a time. That one is short of bytes rather than short of math, and we've said that a few times. It keeps jobs running back to back, so this reading pins at 100 and stays there. But your actual math utilization, your MFU, comes back near zero. That's the same one operation per byte we worked out earlier against the roughly 300 your card wants. Same card, same second, and you're leaving most of that compute on the floor. So is that command useless? Not at all. And I run it every day. Just use it for what it's good at. So is anything running? How much memory is gone? How hot the card is? And what should you never do with it? Don't read that percentage as how much of your GPU is doing useful work, because we just watched it say 100 while nearly all of that compute did nothing. So that number can't tell you which of your two walls you're standing in front of. And your two walls, just so we're on the same page, are running out of math and running out of bytes you can move. So what can tell you? An experiment. And it's the one I promised you at the top. And you already know most of it because earlier in this course we drew a curve by varying one thing and holding everything else still. Same idea here. Hold your prompt length and output length fixed, then walk your batch size up. And your batch size is just how many requests your server is working on at once. And you watch two numbers while you do it, right? Your throughput and the gap between words one user feels. So do you have to walk that blind, doubling all the way up to a few hundred? You don't. Your ridge point says roughly how many requests need to share one read of the weights before compute becomes the thing holding you back. And your cache budget says how many conversations you have room for at all. Whichever is smaller, that's the top of your window, and you test 4 or 5 points inside it. So why run it at all? Because the arithmetic doesn't know your server, and it can't see what your engine spends between steps, or what your allocator does when memory gets tight. So use it to pick where to look, and then let the server tell you which setting is really yours. Question 2. You double your batch size. Your throughput doubles right along with it, and that gap between words barely moves at all. So which wall are you on, and what should you do next? Your memory bandwidth bound, and you've got room to spare, so the answer is keep going. So why does that pattern mean that? When your server writes one word for one person, it drags all of its weights out of memory to do it. And if a second person is served in that very same step, that one trip just produced two words instead of one. So your bytes barely moved and your work doubled, right? Twice the tokens, and nobody waited noticeably longer. So what do? Keep doubling and keep going until that stops being true. Because every request you add is close to free, and you're paying for that trip whether you use it or not. And what does it look like when it stops being true? Your two numbers swap behavior, right? Your throughput flattens out and won't go higher whatever you do. And now that gap between words climbs in proportion to your batch. So you double it, everybody waits twice as long, and you finish the same tokens per second as before. So what happened there? You crossed over. You handed the compute more work than it can get through in the time it has, so now you're compute bound. And another request on top just shares the same work out more thinly. And that's the ridge point we just used to pick your window, met from the other side. And which side of it you're on changes what's even worth trying. Below it, quantization, and anything else that moves fewer bytes will help you. Above it, none of that does a thing, and you're into doing less math instead. So that crossover is the most useful thing on your plot. Go and mark it. So you keep doubling. And how far does that go? Question 3, and it's the last one. You double your batch again, and your throughput goes down. And it keeps going down for as long as you leave the test running. What is it? So this is the one nobody guesses because everything else on that plot moves in one direction and this one turns around and walks back. You ran out of room for your cache. Every conversation your server is holding open has keys and values stored for it, and that store grows with every user and every word. And we did that arithmetic earlier in this course. Your card has a fixed amount of memory, your weights already took their share, so whatever's left puts a hard ceiling on how many conversations you can hold at once. So what happens when you push past it? Your server has already said yes to more requests than it can hold, so it throws some of them back out and their keys and values go with them. Then later it picks them up again and reads their whole prompt from scratch to rebuild what it deleted. And why does that get worse instead of settling down? Because the rereading is real work you already paid for once, and it needs the very thing you just ran short of. So the recovery eats the capacity that was short in the first place, and then something else gets thrown out, and round it goes, right? So your throughput doesn't dip and come back, and it keeps sliding for as long as you leave it there. So what do? Take your batch back down, and the recovery is immediate because nothing is broken here. And the name for this is preemption, and your server counts it for you. And there's a whole module later in this course on the scheduler that gives you the knobs. Now, one more, and I'll tell you this one rather than ask it because you can't get it out of the sweep. Put a single request on your server, nothing else running, and work out your MBU, right? High above 60 or so, with your throughput refusing to rise, and you really are saturating the memory on that card. So the only lever left is moving fewer bytes, low, while your GPU keeps going quiet between jobs and your card is waiting on your software rather than on itself. And I'll say that second one plainly because quantizing is everybody's reflex here. It won't help you at all because you were never short of bandwidth to begin with. And if your sweep comes back ambiguous, there are hardware counters that settle it, and we'll get to those when we do your metrics later in this course. So here's your card, and this is the bit worth screenshotting. What your throughput does as you walk that batch up, and what each one means. Climbing with your batch while the gap between words stays flat, so your memory bandwidth bound and you keep going. Flat while that gap climbs in proportion, so you're compute bound and you've crossed the ridge. Flat early with the gap still flat, so it isn't your hardware at all. And you've either hit a limit somebody configured or you're out of cache room. And going down, so your cache overflowed and work is being redone. So, what did all three have in common? In every one of them, the number in front of you was completely true, and it was answering a different question from the one you asked it. So, what's the one thing to go and do this week? Run that sweep. Hold your prompt shape still. Work out your window first, and then plot your throughput and your gap between words across 4 or 5 batch sizes inside it. But do one thing before you run it. Write down what you think is going to happen. Where do you think your throughput stops climbing? And where does that gap start to rise? And how far up can you push before it turns around and goes down? Then run it and see how close you were. And this is the one time in the whole course where you can check yourself in an afternoon on your own hardware with the tools you already have. So how close were you? Tell me in the comments. And next time we go looking at the metrics, your server already hands you for free, because everything today cost you an experiment, and a lot of what you want is already sitting on a page your server is serving right now. See you next time.